I get the opportunity to do that, thank you very much. I thought it'd be nice if we just took a moment to recognize our AFCEA leadership here that we have the benefit of enjoying their host activity here this week. AFCEA started 70 years ago, back in May, I believe it was, 1946. Has its roots right here at the Army, with the Army Signal Corps. In 1947, evolved into the Armed Services structure of that, and it's evolved from there. It's now a globally recognized leader in providing a mechanism for government and industry to come together and in an ethical environment and really share ideas and create a partnership. So I think it'd be nice if we just took a moment, give a round of applause to our AFCEA team for the great job they're doing. It's a privilege to be able to introduce our keynote speaker. I've had a chance to talk with him a few times today, and certainly the more I get a chance to meet and talk with General Crawford, the more impressed I am with his leadership style and certainly what he's been able to accomplish across his 30-year distinguished career serving our nation and the warfighters across his leadership areas. He's led at both the tactical and the operational and strategic levels of warfare, but more importantly, what I picked up in the conversations and doing my homework on him and researching and talking to folks who knew General Crawford, he's a leader that cares, and someone who come up through all the ranks pretty much in on the Navy side of the house. I can appreciate leaders who have that quality that they look for in how they lead and address their teams, and he certainly embodies that. He does have one flaw. He is the #1 Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I'm told. I shared with him, probably shouldn't have, that I'm a Cowboys fan, so haven't had much to root about in the last 21 years. He's done some amazing things, though, to give back, not just him, but his wife and 2 sons, to the community. They've made extra time to work on things like the real-world investments for science and internships for science and engineering called RISE. And he's done a lot that doesn't get a lot of publicity behind the scenes to get folks interested in, for our young folks interested in STEM and to drive that. Some folks may not realize, I didn't know it, and he shared, and I apologize for being this open, sir, but it's first in his family to graduate college. He's now, when you look back at what he's been able to accomplish over his career and where he came from and the decisions that he's made every day to do better, not just for himself, for his family, for the warfighters, for his teams. I don't think we could ask for a better representation of the 14th commander of our Communications Electronics Command, or what he likes to say, Team Aberdeen. Sir, it's a great honor to be able to introduce you, and I look forward to your comments here this afternoon. Thank you.
On. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Ron, I certainly, up front, I'll tell you, I appreciate the warm welcome, and that was exactly like we rehearsed it this morning, so thank you very much. That went over well, win for me. Well, listen, I'll just say up front, it's an honor. It truly is an honor to be standing before you today. And the real purpose of my being here, when you start to look at this organization called CECOM, what does this organization do? And that's one of my goals, to talk a little bit about that, because I don't spend a lot of time talking about that. But what's its real contribution to the broader cyber effort and to the readiness posture of our Army? And so, in terms of goals and objectives, I want to illuminate and spend about 30 minutes illuminating some of the challenges that I've seen that I really believe in my heart of hearts, if we're able to team, if we're able to partner, will be opportunities. And there will be opportunities for industry. And in the end, on the other side of this, what we'll get out of it is we'll get a more ready Army. And I truly believe that. I'll start by telling you that much of what I've seen over the last 26 months, and again, I've been honored and blessed, I truly believe that, honored and blessed to lead the 21,000 great Americans at Aberdeen Proving Ground. And now, after what happened last February, and I'll talk about that a little bit, in terms of a decision that the AMC commander made, now about 16,000 great Americans that are a part of Communications Electronics Command. It's very clear to me that we need to do a better job of making sure that we're talking to the Army about the things that we're doing. Folks, before I go any further, one of the things that I've seen in the last 30 years, and I've had an opportunity to participate in and be a part of, and come to the realization of, is the importance of the relationship with our industry partners. As I've had the opportunity, Steve mentioned a little earlier, and that General Hodges talked about and others talked about, one of the things I've had the opportunity to do is travel and talk to our partners that are out there. I think we've got a competitive advantage that we don't spend enough time talking about, and that's the relationship with our industry partners. And so to AFCEA, 70 years and still going strong, connecting those who have mutual equities, those with like minds, goals, and aspirations. I say to you, thank you. But to our industry partners that have been a big part of that, I say to you as a soldier, I say to you as the father of a soldier, I say to you, thank you for your service on a daily basis, again, delivering that competitive advantage that our Army has been able to enjoy. When I think about the secret sauce, and that came up earlier, and what separates this Army, what separates our military from every other military that's out there, that absolutely makes us the envy, is this particular relationship, the relationship that we've got with our industry partners. And so I'll close with this part of it as we move on here and say that you ought to be justifiably proud of your contribution, because absolutely, over the last 15 years of continuous combat, you've delivered capability. But I think the thing that you're not capturing is, when I look at my portfolio, everything from night vision goggles to radar, sustainment for all of the Army's tactical communications equipment. I run about 70% of the Army software out of my garage up there at Aberdeen Proving Ground, all right? What our industry partners have done is you've saved lives. You've absolutely saved lives. And so I want to ask for many things today, but what I will ask this group to do is a loud and thunderous round of applause for AFCEA and for our industry partners for your contributions to our soldiers and to readiness. Go to the first slide. So, go back one, please. So a couple of things, all right? So most of you have heard this before. I've got just a couple of insights on it. So our 39th Chief of Staff of the Army has stated, and he's been very vocal about the fact that readiness is our #1 priority in the Army. And then he said, and there are no other #1s. There's something significant about that that makes it different than any other time in our storied history. The fact that he said there are no other #1 priorities. What General Milley has been able to do with that, as you look across the enterprise, with that distinct statement and with his efforts that support that, is he's been able to orient the entire enterprise. No matter what you do in the Army, he's been able to orient the entire enterprise on one thing: delivering readiness on behalf of the soldier. And so as you think about that readiness, General Milley testified, I believe it was back in March, and he made a couple of points. And if you hadn't had the opportunity to take a look at that, I highly encourage you to do that, where he identified the new strategic realities. Among those things that he identified, he made the statement that roughly today, as I stand here and speak to you, about 46% of the emergent combatant, of the current combatant command requirements are Army. about 46%, and that's a pretty big number. But the other statement that's been made is when you take a look at almost literally tomorrow, that number goes to about 64% of the emergent COCOM requirements that are out there where they're asking for Army forces. So if you're in the capabilities business, if you're in the resourcing business, it almost doesn't matter. If you're a part of this community, you got to ask yourself some hard questions about what that means in terms of budget. And so as you listen to the Secretary, as you listen to the Chief and the key points that they are going to be making as we move forward, if we're going to have 64% of the emerging requirements be Army, then it stands to reason that 64% of the emerging budget ought to be related to supporting the Army. And so it's just something to think about, all right? Almost everything we do in the Army and that I'm focused on with the part of the enterprise that I'm charged with is focused on delivering readiness. So I just ask that you pay close attention to that part of it. The fact that more and more as we evolve, and these aren't Army numbers, okay, this was an external evaluation and assessment that roughly 64% of the requirements for the department are going to be requests for the Army. So it's a good time to be a soldier. I won't get into too much of the Army posture in Europe because that's one of the other points that the Chief made and that the Secretary is discussing. When you get an opportunity to hear them just kind of talk about these new strategic realities. And the other part is General Hodges kind of gave my brief this morning, or at least a big piece of it. But those other four areas that you see on the chart there, when you start talking about the intellectual investment, when you think about the intellectual underpinning, you heard the discussions about the electronic warfare challenge, et cetera. Those areas, if I were in the business of delivering capability, I would be paying very close attention to the 5 areas that you see across the bottom of that chart. Think about this for a second. Steve mentioned this a little bit this morning. If you look to the far side, think about the irregular warfare challenge. Think about how Russia ended up getting the presence that they actually did. Think about the plausible deniability. When you take a step back and look at our thinking and how we're shaping our thinking about tomorrow, remember the little green men that were there? Remember the discussions about that's not us, conducting this invasion? One of the things that's causing some concern as you look across the intelligence community and other places is, are there going to be others who are going to adopt that same plausible deniability? And how are we going to train our leaders? How are we going to make them more adaptive? And how are we going to scope them and focus them to be able to get at that challenge? And so, again, as we think about the readiness challenge that our Army faces, never forget and keep in mind that this is not a passing fad, something that we're going to be talking about today, and then we're going to move the Army in a different direction. Now, I can't speak for the entire Army, but I can speak for the part of the Army that is focused on delivering readiness for the Army. And so I'll ask that you keep that in mind. Please go to the next chart. I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to just talk a little bit about this place called Aberdeen Proving Ground. And again, I'm speaking to you as someone who, 26 months ago, much of what I've learned I could not spell. And that was as a general officer in the United States Army, as a sitting director of cyber in Europe, as a 5th Signal Command commander. I had no idea what happened at Aberdeen Proving Ground on behalf of the Army. And so just a couple of factoids. Number one, I won't ask for a show of hands, but most people here remember the Cape Ray. You remember the demilling of chemical weapons that occurred off the coast of Syria. What people don't know is the scientists, the engineers who designed the pods to go on the commercial vessel and then went and sat on that commercial vessel for about 9 months, all came from Edgewood at Aberdeen Proving Ground. Little known fact, but it gives you a feel for the capacity that exists among the 21,000 that are there. Again, over 21,000 civilians, the vast majority of those civilians are contractors, and we're actually pretty proud of that. 5 different centers of excellence, 3 different military installations. 3rd largest employer in the state of Maryland. We're actually tied with Johns Hopkins. I won't read the list to you, but one thing that you ought to pay attention to, if you look at the fact that out of Aberdeen Proving Ground, about $6.5 billion goes into the state of Maryland economy and to the surrounding states that are there. And I want to ask for a show of hands of those of you who are small businesses, but you've got at Aberdeen Proving Ground, year in and year out, the Army's most active small business program in terms of the $2.4 billion that we do in small business. And there have also been some discussions in terms of, if you look out over the horizon at Aberdeen Proving Ground, you ask yourself, so what's the future going to be like? I can tell you that there have been some decisions about an Army component of a national cyber range. And there have been some decisions on putting that at Aberdeen Proving Ground. And so more to follow. When I got there, I had no idea that this was there. Not only that, I didn't understand what the overall contributions were to readiness and to the Army. And you could go across full spectrum from hardware to software. So we'll talk a little bit more about software. Go to the next chart, please. So, global trends. And this is kind of the crux of what I wanted to talk about. One of the things that I've seen is literally right under our noses. I'd say over the last 15 years of continuous combat. We've had some things that have gone from global trends to what I call institutional norms. I mean, they literally have been born and grown right under our noses. But one of the fundamental problems is the institution that we're all a part of has not adjusted to account for that. I'll give you one example, and it's probably my favorite. Software, all right? If you take a look and you step back and look at the exponential growth in software-defined radios, in software-defined weapon systems, it's cause for pause when you look at the other side of this and look at where the institution is, all right? And I'm not just talking about the Army. I'm in the Army, obviously, but I'm talking about the global institution. So the good news is, and this is market-driven, we've moved to a software-defined capabilities, and it's being cranked out, more and more daily. All right. So that's a good news story. All right. Down the road, we're going to be able to modernize a lot cheaper. It's going to be a lot cheaper to modernize the weapon systems that we got. That's the good news story. The bad news story here is that the institution that we are a part of is a hardware-based institution. So I challenge anybody in here to tell me, who the leader is of the Army's Software Center of Excellence. All right? There isn't one. And that's one of the problems. And so as we look over the horizon, we've got to ask ourselves a lot of hard questions about that particular area. In an environment where there's exponential growth in the area of software, why is it that the biggest consumer of software, it affects electronic warfare, it affects all of our weapon systems, why is it that the biggest consumer of software, probably across the department, does not have its own software center of excellence to get at some of the challenges that we got? Again, it's not a showstopper today, but it's costing us a lot of money. We're spending money on things that we could be using, for other modernization because we don't have a center of excellence focused on the challenges that have arisen in software. A couple of other things that I'll ask you to pay attention to that happen in the Army that we do every day. So audit readiness. Just a hot tip for you. Do not underestimate the impact of this directive to the Army to be audit ready, or to the Department of Defense to be audit ready by FY18. Last time I checked, the only department across the government that has not met, at least one of the only, that has not met the audit readiness requirements is the Department of Defense. And so it's another one of those things, again, don't underestimate the importance of that and what the impact is going to be on the way we do business. In terms of other things to think about, so I talked about the fact that I'd been there 26 months. There are a couple of areas that I've identified that I think are worthy of at least potential, future thought and assessment by our industry partners as we look kind of holistically at where can I help the Army and where can I help the department. I've kind of categorized those as, I call them 10-year problems. Because although literally yesterday, we've got to start thinking about how it is we're going to get after these problems, I think it's going to take some time, all right, to solve them. Remember, it took us 15 years, 16 years now, to get ourselves in the position that we're in. And so there is no magic bean, there is no silver bullet, there is no light switch that we're going to be able to flick on and off to solve these problems. One of the most interesting, and it came up in another forum this morning, if you look at the very bottom of the chart, picture this, if you will, that over 70% of those who are wearing the uniform today in all of our formations all came in the Army after 9/11. Over 70%. I've heard numbers as high as 80%. And that's an Army assessment. I'm not sure what it is in the other services, but my guess is it's very similar. You've got to ask yourself some hard questions about, so what does that mean? You heard Colonel Edmondson talk about things that we just take for granted, back to General Milley's point about readiness. He mentioned maintenance. General Vi, my boss, likes to joke in large audiences that he's got this new technology that's been developed. It's a new thing, and it's all the rage, and it's called preventive maintenance checks and services, all right? Coming to a theater near you. The key message here on that kind of post 9/11 73% number is we've got today, and I truly believe this, the best trained, all right, the best led, the best educated force we probably ever had in the history of our United States Army. The things that we're asking them to do, our young captains and lieutenants and sergeants today, yesterday, that was a colonel. That was a lieutenant colonel. That was a senior leader, kind of taking on that problem set. So this isn't a discussion about back to basics, because the basics for them is what they've been doing for the last 15 years of continuous combat. But what this is about, all right, if you look at the icon above, it's about home station training. You're going to hear a lot about that. It is not the coolest subject, and I'll say up front, to be talking about. But when you listen to the chief, when you listen to the vice, when you listen to the secretary and the under, and what they're talking about, they're laser focused on rebuilding some of the capability that we've lost over the last 15 years of continuous combat. And so as industry partners, when you think about where you can help us think through that problem. When you go out to the combat training centers, we've been doing an assessment now for almost 24 months of trouble tickets, believe it or not. My organization, with others, on trouble tickets. We've come to the conclusion now, after multiple CTC rotations, that somewhere between 70 to 80% of the trouble tickets that get submitted on a combat rotation to one of our CTCs, and it doesn't matter what system, you could pick log IT, you can pick WinT series, all the ISR, et cetera, it doesn't matter. Somewhere between 70 to 80% of the trouble tickets that get submitted are operator level issues. Meaning if they can find the TM that goes with the equipment, when they open the TM, it says the operator is supposed to perform this task. That's not good. I don't think that's a good place to be in. Again, at a time when I believe we have the best trained, we have the best led, we have the best educated force that we've probably ever had. That's not a good place to be in when you're trying to go after readiness. All right? That's training, that's leader development, that's equipping and sustainment, to better articulate, what the chief and the secretary are trying to get at in terms of readiness. This audience, like no other audience, given the area that we operate in, C4ISR, ought to be very concerned about that, all right? And the people to blame for the situation that we're in right now, I point it at me. Folks like me, we bought a lot of equipment over the last 15 years of continuous combat. The question now is, how are we going to sustain it? What's our collective game plan going to be to sustain the equipment we have while we think through what the modernization strategies are going to be? So that's kind of the $64,000 question, as my mom likes to say. All right, a couple of areas. So you think about the 73%. You think about the fact that we've got operators who aren't proficient or as proficient as they should be on what we're calling operator tasks. The analogy I like to use in terms of our industry partners. All right, and so I'm very proud of the work that you're doing. I really appreciate the work that you've been doing for the Army, especially over the last 15 years. But to use a medical analogy, for the last 15 years, we've had industry doing things that operators ought to be doing. All right? So we need industry to be doing brain surgery and open heart surgery. Back to the medical analogy. What you've been doing for us over the last 15 years has been checking blood pressure. All right? So we've got to think through, how do we get the sergeant? How do we get the warrant officer back in the business of doing the Army's business? Now, I want to ask how many sergeants and warrant officers we have in here, but this is a problem, and it's something that we need to think our way through. Again, nobody is wringing their hands going, woe is us. We're not going to be able to perform our combat mission. What I've said to leadership also in this discussion about contractors in our formations doing some of the operator level tasks is we're not going to be able to rip the Band-Aid off. Again, it took us 15 years to get it like this. And so we're going to have to make sure that we're thinking our way through and working with you on how do we get industry doing more of the open heart surgery and the brain surgery, and again, not checking blood pressure. Not cause for panic, but it's something that we got to think our way through. And as I told an audience a few weeks ago, we got a couple of choices with this particular problem. We can work with our industry partners to get after this, or we can wait for an ALARACT or an OPPA order, something that comes from the building that says, not only are you going to do this, but here's how you are going to execute it. Highly unlikely that that's going to be the optimal choice for us, and it's going to be exactly what we need. So I just offer that as something to think about. I'm here all week, and we can talk about that, but this is kind of a challenge, and I think it's one of the top 10-year problems after looking at this for 26 months. And that's, when I say this, I mean delivering readiness for the Army in the C4ISR capacity. A couple of things I want to hit, and I won't hit everything there. Tech data. Lots of discussion about this thing that we call tech data rights. As you know, the chief has kind of rearranged the AROC, the Army Requirements Oversight Council. So almost every weapon system goes in there. The familiar theme is, absolutely we've got a capability, but we don't have tech data rights. So what's the second and third order effect of that? I can tell you we have, because we don't have tech data rights, and because we bought a lot of equipment over the last 15 years of continuous combat, I won't tell you which system it is, but we've got one system that has $100 million, all right, in obsolescent parts. Just one. That's only one system has $100 million in obsolescent parts. So there's a second and third order effect to the tech data discussion. I get it. I get intellectual property. Intellectual property is called intellectual property for a reason, and we respect that. But what I'm telling you is, as we move through the various processes in the future, expect a little bit more discussion in the process about tech data and how we're going to approach that from the department. I can almost guarantee you, if you don't remember anything else that I said today, that's going to be something that's going to be on the table for discussion. Lots of discussion about workforce and skill set balancing. I can tell you that the Software Engineering Center that I lead today is about 80% contracted. And I'm not even concerned about the 80% number. What I'm more concerned is that we have the right balance. It could be 90% as far as I'm concerned. But the methodology that got us to the 80% is not, we didn't have a plan. We just kind of woke up one morning and we were 80% contracted. So the way I'm approaching this, just in case anybody's interested, as we move forward in the software space, is I want to identify what the right skill sets are. To be fair to industry, because I get it, industry's looking for predictability. And that's one of the big things with them. And so you deserve that. So in order to provide you more predictability, as an example, one of the things I'm looking at is what skill sets should be inherently government in this area called software development, whether it's code verification or one of the other areas. You know, which of these skill sets ought to be inherently government, and then which are the ones, back to the predictability, should we be pushing to industry to compete for? And that way you're not guessing what's a requirement for us in the area of software development. I know that in the last 24 hours that I've been here around the area, there's been lots of discussion about source selection methodologies, all right? And we won't get into the details of it, but we can have a conversation about source selection methodologies. What I will tell you is on the government side, we've got to figure out what we are willing to pay more for. That's a part of the issue. So it's not just about lowest price technically acceptable. That's a one-size-fits-all. I'm not sure that's the way we need to be going, but that's the world we live in. But in order to help through this process on the government side, we've got to come to the conclusion and figure out what it is we're willing to actually pay more for to help you help us. And that's something that my organization is taking on, and it's something that you're going to see here down the road in the near future. All right, a couple other points that I wanted to hit, and then we'll move on. So there's been lots of discussion about mission command alignment, a decision that General Vi made back on the 23rd of February when he decided to realign Army Contracting Command, APG, who does about 700 contracts per month, about $12 billion annually across the United States. When he decided to align two organizations, one was Army Contracting Command, and the other was CERDEC, to the Lifecycle Management Command, its parent Lifecycle Management Command, which is Communications and Electronics Command. There was lots of discussion about how that came about. I'll just tell you quickly, and again, I'm going to be around all week to have this conversation if you want to hear a little bit more about that. And I'd be very surprised if when General Vi comes on Thursday, he does not mention this. Remember what I said about kind of our current posture in terms of readiness? What General Vi did is he looked at his own organization called AMC with a $50 billion budget and about 123,000 people and said, I'm not optimized to deliver readiness on behalf of the Army. I've got a lifecycle management commander in C4ISR, and I have not given him the tools, the contracting piece and the development piece. He's got sustainment, but he didn't have the development piece and he doesn't have the contracting in order to deliver what the Army needs. And so that decision was made. What it is not, no people actually moved, okay? What it is not linked to is any discussions about acquisition in the future of it. This was a readiness decision that General Vi made, and to be quite honest with you, since February, I think what you're going to see is increased transparency and what I called unprecedented partnering at Aberdeen Proving Ground. And I actually had this sent this to Ms. McFarland recently. Unprecedented partnering between the acquisition and sustainment communities. And for those of you who have been around a while, I do not believe that's been the case in the past. So ultimately, I think the Army is going to get a much, much better deal based on the collaboration and the coordination and the partnering that's going to occur between the two communities. And so I'll close, and I had one more thing that I wanted to do because I understand that we do have the lunchtime crowd. And that you all didn't come here to this conference to hear me bump my gums, as my wife likes to tell me. But I did want to close by saying this is in no way, form, or fashion, the software discussion, the current posture of our force. This is not, again, about a negative thing or us sitting around wringing our hands about the challenges that await us. But it's a clear-eyed and sober assessment of where we think our Army is after 15 years of falling in on infrastructure, 15 years of starting with a something, vice what we're asking of tomorrow is starting from nothing and then building that capability. This is kind of where we are right now. And so we're going to need the collective efforts of our industry partners to help us see the way ahead. And so I'm going to ask your indulgence. I have about a 2-minute video that I wanted to show you. And it really is about 2 minutes and change. And then I'll come back up and I'll close this and I'll let you get on with the business of engagement and collaboration throughout the conference today. If we can roll this, I'll cross my fingers here. I haven't been an old ad, so I still shudder when there's technology rolling and whether I'm in charge of it or not. So.
On April 7th, the Communications Electronics Command memorialized those who helped shape its history, as 5 distinguished members were inducted into the inaugural CCOM Hall of Fame. The class of 2016 consists of Lieutenant General Retired Emmett Page Jr., Major General Retired Robert Morgan, Mr. Mason Lynn, the late Dr. Stanley Cronenberg, and Mr. Victor Furlies. Their many career contributions are now permanently displayed in the CCOM headquarters building at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. The Hall of Fame unveiling and the official induction ceremony was attended by family, friends, community partners, and CCOM leadership from past and present, to include General Dennis L. Vi, the Commanding General of Army Materiel Command. Major General Bruce T. Crawford, the CCOM Commanding General and host of the Hall of Fame events, joined General Vi to speak about the importance of honoring those who helped shape CCOM become an Army leader for sustainment and readiness.
What separates us from every other profession is this is what we do. We pause and we reflect routinely on what makes us great. We pause and reflect on the careers and the contributions of those who came before us. And ultimately, folks, when you think about the profession, that is what makes us the trusted professionals that we are today.
We know that this command's strength was forged long ago by their vision, their commitment, their dedication and perseverance, and especially their hard work. We also know that whatever success CCOM enjoys today and whatever it achieves tomorrow is in large part to the solid foundation which they helped build so many years ago.
The inductees also shared their gratitude for this high honor and delighted the audience with their fond memories from decades of selfless service.
Had a good time in the Army. I'd still be there if I could.
Reporting for CCOM Public Affairs, I'm Chris Joseph.
So folks, the reason I showed you that video actually had nothing to do with Communications Electronics Command. The reason I showed you that video has absolutely zero to do with Army Materiel Command. The reason I actually showed that video, and I made a decision that it was probably a good idea to share this with this community, has to do with legacy. It has to do with who we are as a profession. And so you don't need to be lectured by some, 50-something-year-old general officer up here at the podium about what it means to be a professional. But the thing that we do have to think about, so 47 years ago, we put a man on the moon. 47 years ago. Sometimes we lose perspective about who actually developed the technologies starting before World War II that led to putting a man on the moon. As our V. POTUS likes to say, he calls it a moonshot. And so my reason for showing that is to say, before our time, mentors of ours, people we knew, they made a contribution. They sacrificed. They were intellectually curious. They collaborated, and their collaboration and their sacrifice and their intellectual curiosity led to putting someone on the moon. And this was the foundation on which, as Steve talked about this morning, the Signal Corps. And so we had many challenges. But the question for this group, at about 17:30 on Thursday, we're going to be heading home. We're going to be heading back to the problems of the world that we left. But at that time, what will we have done, and what are we going to be doing in the next couple of years to make our contribution, so that one day folks are going to look back at us and say, it was this group that moved beyond the barriers that were talked about this morning. It was this group that overcame great challenge, budgetary crisis, a very complex world. Ultimately, it was this group that delivered our version of putting a man on the moon. And if you think that's not in the realm of the doable, take a look at some of the things that are being discussed and technologies that are going to be available in 2045, in 2050. If you don't believe that we're going to have a similar challenge that's going to face us. And so that was the real reason I wanted to show that video. Again, nothing to do with my organization, because we're a very small part of this. But it says something about the legacy. It says something about the folks on whose shoulders we all sit and stand proudly today. And so, in closing, there's a picture up there. My good friend and partner, and a guy that I've developed a great deal of respect for, even though he told my 19-year-old, then 18-year-old last year, who was about to head off to college, that studying was overrated, and that he shouldn't worry about that, and he should have as much fun as he can. I really wanted to take the opportunity to thank Steve Fogarty. No one else that I know would have been able to pull off what he's been able to pull off over the last 24 months or so. And I did not want to let this moment pass also without recognizing the contributions of another good friend, and that would be the great Warren Patterson, because he was there when the page was blank, when there were no good ideas, and he was the guy that was carrying the mantle. And so Steve was able to walk in and, just like we do in the Army, when you change leaderships, take us to the next level and beyond and set the stage. And so my closing was to ask for a round of applause for Major General Steve Fogarty, a great American who's done so much for our country. So folks, thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And again, if you have anything to put in my rucksack, whether it's electronic warfare or software or any of the other 1 million things that we're all trying to get our minds around, let's have that conversation. Thank you very much.
Please welcome back to the stage Lieutenant General Bob Wood to formally thank on behalf of AFCEA and our audience.
As General Crawford mentioned, he will be in the area. Sorry, we can't take questions now, but it's a sincere and honest offer to answer your questions and load his rucksack. So thank you very much, General Crawford. And thank you to those who were so kind to offer some kind applause and congratulations to AFCEA and to our team here. It's an honor, it's a privilege to serve, and that was very meaningful to us. Thank you very much.